Hey there, fam. How's it going? I'm Nate Savage.
Hey, I'm Chelsea.
And this is the third video in the series of how do you work this thing? And we're going to go over drive pedals. This is probably the most convoluted and complicated and oversaturated part, pun intended, of playing the guitar because there's so many options out there. So it's really hard to know what pedals should I use, how do I use them, when do I use them, and just because there's so many options out there. So we just want to take you through and just give you the basics, like what's the difference between overdrive, distortion, and fuzz, and then give you some pointers on how to set up your pedals and when to use them.
Yeah, and there's so many pedals to choose from, so I'm excited to dive into this with you. And also, because there's so much variety, let us know in the comments below what is your favorite pedal for overdrive, distortion, or fuzz. And
my favorite two pedals are actually here on the board. This is both me and Chelsea's. Chelsea and I's setup. We have both of us have these pedals on our boards. It's just an Ibanez Tube Screamer and a full tone OCD pedal. And the first topic that we need to discuss is what's the difference between overdrive and distortion and fuzz, because that can be a little bit confusing. Overdrive to me is a lot smoother sounding. It's not as aggressive sounding. Like if there was a sound wave, the tops and bottoms of the waves would be like rounded over and really smooth sounding for overdrive. If you have distortion, like distortion pedals like the Boss DS1 or something like this OCD pedal, then the spikes, the peaks and valleys are going to be pokey, like sharp, like that, more like a saw. And it's easier for me to let you see what it sounds like than it is to try and describe it to you. So here you go. Let me just put this on. And here's an overdrive pedal or the Tube Screamer. So I'm going to turn that down just a little bit. It's pretty smooth. It's like really sustainy sounding, kind of like a violin. You can't always tell there's actual distortion there. If you do the same thing for this OCD pedal, it's going to get a lot more aggressive sounding in a hurry. So. And it gets into rockland a lot easier than something like a Tube Screamer or something like that. So it's really just, to me, it's different levels of aggression.
I like that. That's easy to translate, I guess.
Yeah. So like if I was going for something really smooth, I would probably use overdrive, and if I was going for something really aggressive, then I would probably go for something more along the lines of a distortion pedal. Now,
and then there's fuzz.
Fuzz, yeah, exactly. Fuzz is in kind of its own category, and I really don't like fuzz pedals per se. I don't even own any, believe it or not. So I'm gonna have to pull up a model of a fuzz pedal here on this guy, and I'll do that real quick. Okay, I got a fuzz pedal I'll pull up here, and check this out. This is like off the charts, just aggressive and gnarly. You hear how those, like the overtones went up an octave there, and it was really wild sounding. That's one of the characteristics of fuzz, is it has a lot of different overtones that distortion and overdrive might not necessarily have, but it is a lot more unruly, and it can get buried in a mix. So you have to use it kind of carefully and just pick and choose when you want to use it, because it can get lost in the mix if you're in a band. But having said that, I'm not the most knowledgeable person on fuzz in the world, but I know, like, there are some times when I know I need it for the particular style of music, but other than that, I usually do just overdrive or distortion pedals more.
All right, so the next thing is actually setting up the pedals. Now, sometimes I just am like a deer in headlights sometimes when I look at different buttons and knobs. I'm like, I don't know what to do with this. How do I work this thing? So I would love to go through the different knobs and settings on the two pedals. And, Tube Screamer, OCD. Okay. And I guess we're not doing Blues Driver.
I'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay, perfect, yeah.
Okay, so first off, if you haven't seen the video on where we show you how to set up your amp, I think it's the second video in the series, go watch that one. Yep. It walks you through how to set up your amp as a pedal platform or like a palette for your pedal so it reacts the best for that. The basic idea of it is push your amp, the distortion or the drive on your amp, up enough to where it just starts to break apart. Just
on
a
the
little
edge
bit.
Of breakup.
On the edge of breakup.
Just makes me think of relationships.
It's going through a tough time.
Yeah.
But that's a good spot to where your pedals will react really nicely with your amp. Having said that, let's start with this overdrive pedal. You have overdrive, which is just the amount of distortion, if you will, or overdrive.
Okay.
Your tone is just like the tone knob on your guitar. So if you turn it down, it'll roll off on the high end, or turn the treble down.
Okay. So it'd be a little bit more like kind of boomy, like the...
No, it'll just suck some of the tone out of it. Takes the high end out of it, right? And then level is just the amount of level or signal going to the amp. And this one's a really important one because if you hit the front of an amp harder, it can really make it sensitive and push the amp, especially if it's a tube amp, to where it sounds really good. It starts to sound really awesome. As opposed to, like, if I had it down here. The problem with tube screamer type pedals is that if you set the level too low, you end up hearing both the dry signal of the guitar and the distorted signal of the pedal and at the same time. And it's kind of weird. So you just want to make sure, and this will get us into the kind of next point, is how do you set up an overdrive pedal, right? And I'd like to do two different ways. The first thing you want to make sure to do is put the level up to where you're not getting that kind of dualistic clean sound and distorted sound all at once. And that's usually on these type of pedals just above, at least above noon, or at least above 12 o'clock. And so where you're not hearing that kind of divided signal. From there, I like to, the first way I like to set these pedals up is to where the overdrive is almost all the way down. That way it gives me just kind of a pushed feel. It's almost clean if I play really light, but if I dig in, it has a little bit of grit on it, which is really nice. And it just fattens up the tone. That's what mainly I use it for, is if I have my original clean tone through the amp, and then the overdrive on, it just fattens it up a little bit.
Okay, so it gives you a more, like a fuller sound without being actually distorted.
Yeah. To me, it's fuller and it has a lot more sustain to it too, so your notes don't die out as quickly, and they have a lot more power to them. Right. And
so like if for people who are doing bends,
yeah,
maybe so it doesn't, because I notice sometimes when I'm practicing my bends, if I don't have that on, it
just kind of dies off.
Like by the time, especially if it's a slower bend, by the time I hit my note, like
then
you can't even hear the guitar.
Yeah, exactly. For the tone knob on this, I always like to have it just below noon. That may be different for you depending on your amp or your guitar, but that's just a generalization. So that's the first function that I use an overdrive pedal for, is just to thicken up my clean sound, make it a little fatter, give it a little more sustain. And the second way I use it is if I know a little more aggressive rhythm part is coming up in a song, I'll reach down with my toe and turn that up. And then you're in rock land, right? It's not super aggressive sounding, but there is a lot more there. I'm gonna turn this down a little bit. There's a lot more there as far as meat. Right? And there's a lot more sustain, that's for sure. But it's still not too aggressive sounding. And that to me is classic tube screamer tone, and it's unfortunate that I can't crank this amp more, because the more you crank an amp, the more something like this, a pedal that has the overdrive up and the level pushed, it just makes your amp sing if you're using a tube amp. So that's the two ways that I use an overdrive pedal.
Yeah, so that's one of the, I guess, drawbacks of living in an apartment.
Yeah, after today,
neighbors upstairs.
Our neighbors are gonna be like, "What are they doing?"
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to distortion pedal. This OCD, for all intents and purposes, it's a distortion pedal. It's way more aggressive sounding than like an overdrive pedal. You have the same knobs, volume, which is going to be the same thing as a level. You have your drive, which is the same thing as overdrive, and then your tone. You can use this in a couple different ways. You can have the drive set pretty low like this for a less aggressive rhythm sound. Even then, that sounds more aggressive than the tube screamer to me.
Yeah.
Or you can crank it up to be really aggressive, right? Full rock. Right? So it depends how aggressive you want. That's the main thing between overdrive and distortion to me. If you're into rock, hard rock, metal, what you will probably end up doing if you're using the clean channel of your amp, it's just going directly into it, clean channel, and then using the pedal, not the amp, not the pre-gain on the amp or anything like that, to get your distortion, just fully relying on the actual distortion pedal.
All right, and I know that Nate will sometimes combine the two pedals and have them both on.
Yeah.
And so, like, how does that work? What order did you put them in? And yeah, all that.
Okay, to me, if I'm using a clean amp for a pedal platform, it all comes down to just different levels of aggression and how many combinations of this can I get for the maximum amount of versatility and levels of aggression throughout a gig that I need. So I might need something that's ultra clean all the way up to something that's just super saturated and distorted for really big leads. So generally what I'll do is I'll set my amp up clean just like we talked about. And then I'll have this pedal, my first overdrive pedal, set up to where it's really light overdrive. That way, this is kind of like my second level of just barely rhythm guitar, right? Now, if I need something a little more aggressive than that, what I'll usually do is my distortion pedal I have set up here really low, and then I'll have that on by itself. Maybe something like this. So that's kind of the next level up, just one notch up. If I need even more rhythm distortion on my rhythm, then I'll either turn that one on as well, or I'll reach down here with my toe and adjust the drive knobs to suit what I need.
Okay. And in terms of the order, which one do you put first in the two?
It depends what pedals you're using. You're going to have to experiment with what pedals if you want to stack them.
Okay.
Because they're going to react differently and they're going to sound different when they're in different order. I found that this order for these two pedals works really great for me. It's my favorite combination.
So you have like the less aggressive first and then slowly.
Right, but if you take this pedal out and stick a different one in this place, I could not like the way that sounds.
Yeah.
So from there, we've gotten up to like a medium amount of gain with both of these on, right? But what if I need something that's more aggressive? What I'll do is I'll have this one up. And if I need even more than that, tube screamer on. Turn this down a bit. And if that's still not enough, I'll reach down with my toe. And then I have all the sustain I need in the world.
Okay.
So it's just levels. What is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 or 6 levels.
Okay.
Of stacking pedals or messing around the gate knobs with your toes.
So each of them individually, them together, and then plus them turned down versus turned up.
Turned up, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And often, like, I don't really get to this level much. Often my tube screamer will stay somewhere moderate, and then I'll just play with this to get a little bit more gain out of it.
And then, so we talked about the order of them in relation just to each other. But
Right.
now, what about the order in relation to all the other pedals?
Generally, they come first.
Okay.
But, I mean, look here. That's not the case on this pedal board. I have my volume pedal first and my tuner first, right?
Okay. Yeah.
Often, if you're running a compressor, the compressor will come before distortion pedals or overdrive pedals as well.
Okay.
But those are the main categories that come before. Wah, volume, tuner, and compressors generally come before drive pedals. If you don't have any of those, drive pedals first.
So then your delay and reverb will come after.
Delay and reverb usually come after the drive pedals and maybe even in your effects loop of your amp.
Okay.
Cool. And all of this is subject to change. These are just general guidelines that people have used over the years, but I've seen people break these rules too, so.
Well, I think it's good to start with general guidelines, especially if you're in the beginning. If someone just says, do whatever you want, then it's like overwhelming. So I think it's great to start with some guidelines.
Yeah.
and then you can branch out from there and experiment. But I think that it just at least gives us a starting point, so it's not so overwhelming.
Yeah, if you put your delay and reverb first before your drive pedals, you're going to end up with some really gnarly, catastrophic sounding things that might not be great for you. So this is a good general order to do things.
All right, so the world of overdrive and distortion pedals is just huge and a little bit overwhelming, I guess, just because there's so much variety and so much to choose from. And so for somebody like myself who is not particularly experienced in electric guitar playing, what would you recommend for pedals?
Okay,
obviously the Tube Screamer, you like that one, an OCD.
when it comes down to it, if you're new to electric guitar and you're just getting into overdrive and distortion pedals, you can't go wrong with the things that have been around forever. Yeah, there might be some things out there that you for sure will like better, but you're not even going to know that until you get a taste for what like the original stuff was. So some kind of Tube Screamer for an overdrive pedal that colors your amp a little, has its own kind of sound. If you want something that just pushes your amp a little harder, an electro-harmonic soul food is really great, and both of those are relatively inexpensive options. If you want a little more expensive options for like a Tube Screamer type overdrive pedal, the Bonsai is really awesome. It's pretty much every Tube Screamer, every iteration of a Tube Screamer ever made in one little pedal. And this is really cool. This replaced that pedal on my board. But it's more expensive. So you're gonna have to decide what your budget is too. As far as distortion pedals, there are so many out there nowadays, but just to get a good idea of what a distortion pedal can do, get a Boss DS1. You can pick them up for like $20 on Craigslist.
Oh, nice.
Or a new, they're not that expensive. I think you can get them for 40 or 50 bucks new. OCD is kind of a pedal that's a hybrid of an overdrive and a distortion, but it's definitely more aggressive, or it can get more aggressive. And I really like this pedal. If I could only have one overdrive pedal, that might be it. Or one distortion pedal.
Well, that's saying something.
Let's see. Another couple of pedals that you might want to check out are a Blues Driver. This one is another, again, it's kind of like middle ground between an overdrive and a distortion pedal. It's not super aggressive, but it is a little more edgy, but it's still smooth. A Rat pedal, R-A-T-S, like the rodent, is a distortion pedal has a very classic sound, so you might want to check that out too.
All right, and then I know you said fuzz isn't your favorite, but do you know of any pedals that you'd recommend?
Like the classic fuzz pedal is the Big Muff Pi. Yes, I said it, Big Muff Pi. And
awkward.
Yeah, awkward. But probably my favorite fuzz pedal, if I had to pick one right now that I'd be like, yeah, I would have that on my board, would be a Wampler Velvet Fuzz. I just like the way it sounds. And neither of those pedals are overly expensive for what they are. You can certainly do a lot more damage to your bank account on fuzz pedals than those two.
Cool. Well, leave your recommendations below, because I'm sure there are lots of other pedals that people love that we haven't mentioned, or that you haven't mentioned.
Yeah, and the older I get, this brings me to one more point that I forgot. So the older I get, the more I'm like, just give me a Tube Screamer and I'll figure out the rest with my amp. Okay. One really common use for a Tube Screamer or any overdrive pedal will be if you have a 2-channel amp, like an amp with a distortion channel on it that's really aggressive. One really common function of a Tube Screamer type of pedal or an overdrive pedal is to turn it on for a lead on your dirty channel, on your 2-channel amp, that just kicks it over the edge and makes it insane. That's another really common use that like a lot of hard rock and metal bands use overdrive pedals for. So it's always good to have a Tube Screamer kicking around just in case you need it.
All right, and I think that's the end of my questions.
Okay.
So thank you for tuning in. I hope you learned something as well. Make sure to like and subscribe, because we still have more videos coming out in this series. And
don't forget, it's great to have all this knowledge and stuff, but until you sit down with your pedals that you have and really learn how they work, none of all this stuff really doesn't mean anything. It's just words that have come out of our mouths. And that reflect our experience with drive pedals. You need to go out there and get your own experience with your pedals. And if you need help doing that, you can go to guitarfam.com and schedule a private one-on-one lesson with me, just to figure out your gear or to figure out anything else that you're struggling with on guitar. The first lesson is complimentary, so I'd love to help you out and meet you.